Dangerous illegals are invading U.S. cities. They're the masked vigilantes that are disappearing people off the street. They're the fascists occupying the White House and the Congress, and that includes the 75 Democrats who expanded ICE budgets by 30% under Biden and just now praised those stormtroopers kidnapping kids, cancer patients, moms and dads, some of them detaining senators for their PR spokeswoman, who I really want to call Barbie Aryan. But it's too petty. Anyway, she's the Secretary of Homeland Security, and she's calling for the liberation of the biggest state in the Union from socialists, which is their Leave It to Beaver word for society. These real dangerous illegals would use the word socialist to smear Plato, Aristotle, Adam Smith, and definitely Jesus Christ at this point. So they need an education, since it was socialist thinking that created the first majority middle class in the history of humankind in the first place. It was socialists who fought for women's rights and labor rights and children's rights and civil rights and weekends and overtime and coined the word capitalism as a critique against the hoarding of all the resources of a planet in the hands of a few sociopaths who think it's their divine right to lord over the rest of us. An ideology that's been eviscerated by every prophet, poet, and priest of every tradition on every continent of every people since the dawn of time. And the real dangerous illegals, who are led by this compulsive liar with 34 felonies who are invading our cities, have done their best to make capitalism the official religion of the world. That is the New World Order, and it's the order of the Golden Calf, which idolizes money and power and violence and war. And that this cult has shamelessly dispensed of due process means they've removed the keystone principle that separates a stable society from one destined for collapse. Because when you rule by force, rather than by respect or merit or care or inspiration, you just invite the same in return. A lesson these real dangerous illegals could have learned from Confucius, Cicero, Seneca, Moses, Jesus Christ, and Muhammad, peace be upon them all, but only if they'd read. But rather than invest in humanities and sciences, they're busy cutting funding from everything that ennobles the human condition and trying to take over universities, burn all our books, and change immigration law so that anybody who isn't a white nationalist is suddenly illegal. But here's the thing about picking a fight with reality. You always lose. No human being is ever illegal, and being an undocumented human being is as serious an infraction as skateboarding in Union Square. And if you don't know what that means, you need to visit New York City, because that's the actual capital of your country, not the swamp that you were hired to drain that instead you're overflowing. And dragging a person out of their school or a job or a courthouse right after a judge just scheduled another hearing at the end of a gun because of their skin color or language is literally the work of barbarian hordes, the kind that sacked the Roman Empire. Once again, human beings are never illegal, especially not on stolen land. Land we only occupy because European invaders violated every treaty they ever signed in a project that, let's be honest, was founded not as a nation, but a business enterprise, which included the hostile takeover of not just the Americas, but over 85% of our entire planet's landmass, which 11 European countries then just carved up for themselves. That story, our real history, is why 33 of 50 not very united states have Spanish and native names, except for California, which is Spanish and Arabic. One of many examples of how multiculturalism is inextricably intertwined with the Americas, a word which is not English. This also applies to the human race. Our cities were invented in Persia, which is Iran, and our planet's most famous leaders, who all come from one family in the Middle East. We are a species whose coffee was invented in Yemen in the port of Mocha, and whose paper was made in China, upon which the works of poetry and philosophy and medicine and plumbing and math all developed from us sharing information with each other and having all kinds of interactions all across this round earth. And here's another thing about this place. We have the right to travel around it. We're going to interact and work and live and raise families and be neighbors with whoever we want on all the land, because all the land is holy and all human beings are indigenous to this planet. We all have rights to its air and water and soil, and by an authority much greater than you, all of us seem to be chosen to be here. And any walls you try to build, we're going to tear down, because you're not trapping us on your feudal lands and pretending we're your peasant labor force anymore. What you just watched in New York and Los Angeles, Chicago, Austin, Boston, St. Louis, Minneapolis are our cities, the capitals of our economy and culture and commerce, saying no. No kings, no oligarchs, no feudal lords, no tyrannies by any word, whether you want to call it the state or the corporation, because we all know there's no difference. And we see right through those masks. We'd recognize you anywhere. Stop calling yourselves Republicans when your entire movement is hell-bent on tearing down the whole concept of a republic. You're Confederates, supremacists, an ideology that only leads to self-destruction. And we want to see humanity come together and thrive, so we're not giving you another inch. And just in case you forgot, we beat you in the Civil War. We beat you on the beaches of Normandy. We beat you in Birmingham, Stonewall, and on O'Connell Street, and we're going to beat you again. And that does not mean falling in line behind so-called democratic leaders who believe democracy means every dollar gets a vote. Dr. King showed us the playbook when he worked outside the corrupted party system, whose two factions have militarized our police, deregulated technology, drilled oil at record levels, and continue to unite in raining bombs down upon men, women, and children for money and pretend that that is a religion. Dr. King called out these juvenile delinquents in adult bodies, the most dangerous illegals on earth, for their worship of the unholy trinity: militarism, classism, and racism. And Dr. King set clear demands with direct action, and that's how he flipped our party system on its head and won voting rights and desegregation in one of the most racist and violent empires on earth. His next objective, the one for which he was assassinated, was universal economic rights, the right of all of us to live on this earth as equals in every empire and every village, regardless of these imaginary differences. The most absurd aspect of this predicament in which we find ourselves is that we have everything we need for a thriving world where all are fed, housed, and provided for. We have all the wealth, the resources, and the knowledge, and the only thing standing in our way are those dangerous illegals whose control over our news media leaves their crimes undocumented while they pretend to speak for us. And so we're marching again. And not just in every city, but in every nation, from Palestine to Dublin, London to Khartoum, Chicago to Shanghai to Kinshasa, Islamabad to Baghdad, from New Delhi to Dearborn, from Taiwan to Tehran. The anti-apartheid protesters and conscientious objectors in Tel Aviv to their sisters and brothers in Minneapolis. We want peace, equality, food, housing, healthcare, meaningful work, human rights, digital rights, and an end to this stranglehold of militarism, classism, and racism, an end to the segregation, a revolution in human values. And our first step is telling this regime of dangerous illegal invaders that it's time to step down.